NASA satellites are looking down at the Earth all the time. The atmosphere, the land, the ice, and the oceans. We capture those observations in understanding, and we capture that understanding in models, and those models let us predict. We know that our climate is changing. We're at about 1.2 degrees so far, and we are still learning about how the whole system works. But we do know that there's an enormous range between the best and the worst outcomes. So at NASA, we are working with urgency to bring you the best observations, models, and predictive tools we can to help inform decisions, locally, nationally, and internationally. Thank you.
We know our climate is changing, according to NASA. Global temperatures in 2021 were 0.85 degrees Celsius above the NASA baseline average. The planet's long-term warming trend continues. Overall, the last 8 years are the warmest years since modern records began in 1880, and these annual temperature data from NASA set the global temperature record, showing scientists that the planet is warming. Climate change threatens people with food and water shortages, increased flooding, extreme heat, more disease and economic losses. Human migration and conflict may be the result. The World Health Organization calls climate change the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. The United Nations in Geneva also addressed the issue of climate change in relation to the protection of human rights. We talk in a moment with the Holy See's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, Archbishop Fortunatus Nwachukwu, who attended the meetings. Climate change, not a new phenomenon. Now here on EWTN TV UN Blog. At the end of June, the Human Rights Council met at the UN in Geneva for the 50th time. It was about climate change in relation to the promotion and protection of human rights. You were present and also gave a statement for the Holy See. Archbishop Fortunatus Nwachukwu, good afternoon, Excellency.
Good afternoon, Christian, and thank you for having me.
Is there a difference between climate change and global warming, or do the two go together?
Well, Christian, I have to confess that I'm not an expert in the field, but from an ordinary person's point of view, climate change is the long-term shift in the temperature and weather patterns at the global, regional, or local levels of our climate, of our planet. When that shift means a gradual rise in the temperature at a global level, then we speak of global warming. So global warming is, yes, a part of climate change.
Der Klimawandel ist kein neues Phänomen, das erst in den letzten 15 Jahren oder so aufgetreten ist.
It is not a new phenomenon. Climate change, the shift in temperature and weather patterns is something that has been there always, because it has two causes. It could be due to natural causes or also human causes, human activity. Natural causes are usually from the solar cycles, the movement and the changes in the solar cycle. That means the distance at a particular moment of the sun from the earth. When the sun is closer to the earth, we have higher temperatures, and when the distance is greater, then we have also lower temperatures. But since the 19th century, experts believe that human activity has been contributing quite a lot in global warming, in climate change, through the emission of the greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Greenhouse gas, that means carbon dioxide and methane especially. And these usually come from the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, especially the burning of coal, of oil, and of gas. This is not just the burning at the local level in small houses, but due to increased industrial activity. And the greenhouse gases, the greenhouse gas forms a kind of blanket in around the earth, the atmosphere of the earth, and this blanket then of greenhouse gas traps the heat that comes from the sun. And then with this heat, we have the temperature of the earth rise. This is what we have as global warming. And the consequence is that as the temperature rises also, we have, for example, glaciers melting, and then we have the rising of the sea level, and then we have a kind of problem with the normal equilibrium of the forces of the weather, so that we have increased or greater frequency of natural disasters like floods, like hurricanes, and so on. This is the consequence, according to most experts, of increased human activity involving the emission of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere.
Yes, and experts like those at the US space agency NASA, who have the largest Earth observation fleet in the world, provide continuous evidence of climate change. And as you mentioned, increasing greenhouse gases are trapping heat in the Earth's atmosphere, and that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, oceans and land. Now, why is climate change such a controversial topic today, in your opinion?
Well, it is controversial because many people think that climate change is a natural phenomenon. In the past, we have had the disappearance of oceans, the shift of land masses, and so people believe that what we have today as climate change, some people believe that this is something totally natural, that the Earth continues to go through its process of evolution as a result of its relationship, I would say so, with the sun. If you go to what today is Sahara Desert, people believe that so many years ago we had in the Sahara Desert an ocean. Some years ago, when I was serving in Algeria, I traveled to the southern part of Algeria, to the town of El Golea. There was a Jesuit priest who was taking care of a museum, and the museum was gathering ocean-based fossils from the Sahara Desert. And it is amazing to have somebody tell us that what today is the great desert was at a time ocean. So people believe that even without the emission of greenhouse gas, we will still have the mutations we are having in the earth. People who say that everything is to be attributed to the cause of nature may have an argument, but they do not disprove the fact that human activity is playing a major role in causing greater global warming.
Was ist nun, wenn ich als Christ glaube,
What if, as a Christian, I believe that regardless of all the violations of God's laws, natural laws, in the end, despite our irresponsibility, the omnipotent God may intervene at the last moment and save us from a climate catastrophe?
Well, God does not save us through our recklessness, I must tell you, Christian. If we were to read very carefully the book of Genesis, chapter 2, all the way from verse 8, we have that God, after he had created the human being, put him in a garden and told him to take care of the garden. So we have a responsibility to take care of the earth that God has put in our hands. The Pope Francis, speaks of the universe, of the earth as our common home. This is in the encyclical Laudato Si. Nobody wants to have his home destroyed. Instead of having our home destroyed, we like to take care of our homes. Once in a while, we clean our home. We try to avoid those activities that would be detrimental to the upkeep of our homes. And if this universe, if the world, if the earth is our common home, and if God entrusted this home to us, to our care, we have a responsibility to take care of our home. If we treat it recklessly, God also, and this is very interesting, God does not force his will on the human being. He has given us freedom of choice, and therefore he tells us and shows us what to do, and he allows us to choose the good or the evil. If we decide to choose self-destruction, the destruction of our home, God is not going to force us the other way. He has shown us what are the good things we need to choose, and that is the protection and the care for our home in order that we may live well in our home. That is why the Church, the Holy See, in its position in these negotiations, in these interventions, insists on the life and the dignity of the human person and the common good. Actually, the Holy See has been saying that climate change has got a human face. It has got a human face on two grounds. First ground, because climate change affects the human being. On the second count, the human being can also, through his activity or her activity, provoke climate change. We have to watch the fact that quite often those countries that are more responsible for the emission of greenhouse gases are the developed countries with greater industrial activity. The poor, the least developed, and the developing countries only contribute actually a negligible fraction of the emission of greenhouse gas. But when the consequences come, it is these poorer, least developed, and developing countries that suffer most. I served until recently in the Caribbean region, and I see the experience of the little island countries that suffer the consequences of these natural disasters. There is the constant threat of the rising sea level that could even cause the disappearance of these small island countries. And then we have the problem of hurricanes that are getting more and more frequent. And these countries, with their little economies, keep spending great amount of the little they have in trying to rebuild after each attack, each hurricane that comes across. That is why Pope Francis, talking to the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See last 12th of January, said to them, or pointed out the fact that the problems of climate change are interconnected. They affect every part of humanity. Unfortunately, the solutions that are offered are not interconnected. They are often fragmented. We have some countries refusing to live up to their responsibilities of trying to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, while the poorer countries find themselves quite often helpless because they suffer these consequences, they bear the brunt of the increased industrial activities of these developed countries. So the solution that is needed, which is a solution which the Holy See keeps proposing, is a solution that involves greater concerted effort, greater international solidarity in seeking and applying durable solutions to the challenge and the menace of the negative consequences of climate change.
The Pontifical Academy of Sciences was hosting a two-day conference, July 13 and 14, at the Vatican's Casino Pio IV, with the theme Resilience of Humans and Ecosystems Under Climate Stress. Opening the event, Pope Francis said that the world faces a dual challenge: to reduce climate risks by reducing emissions and support and empower people to adapt to increasingly worsening climate changes. He noted that the Holy See and the Vatican City State recently joined the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Praise Be, Pope Francis said that the science of climate change is clear and that the Catholic Church views climate change as a moral issue that must be addressed to protect the earth and all the people on it. We wish you and us cooler days. God bless.